Okay, I'll start then. So Sasha's given me the honour of introducing myself. I do feel like the Queen sitting here in my throne, and this is obviously the panel for the clear glasses cohort. So I'll put those on as well. So I am Dr. Alice Bell, although I don't need them until I read. And I'm Associate Professor in Fine Art at the University of Lincoln, which is in the kind of central west part. It's really hard to get to, but I did meet Paola there for the first time, which was really nice.
And I've been to Lincoln, and Lincoln is an amazing medieval town.
Yes.
With like a great
city
with the great cathedrals and everything.
Yeah.
And it's situated sort of middle of nowhere, but close to everything.
Yes. Yes, so beautiful castle, beautiful cathedral. For context, I flew in last night, so I'm really happy to be here, and I'm also really sorry to have missed what looked like such a rich, exciting conference. So I sort of hope that me presenting will also give me opportunity to hear from you and to have some provocations. Yeah, around sort of performativity and politics, etc. Also for context, I met Paola first in Manila in the Philippines, and selfishly, I kind of just wanted to be here to meet Sasha and Paola and meet everybody again, and really be part of driving this new group, which I'm really excited about. So, and I wanted to see Belgrade, and I brought my sons with me. So I'm just ad-libbing now about this. So they're 21 and 18 still in bed, but I'm hoping they will appear at 1 to go and look at things. That's fun. So my background is in fine art, also production media, digital technologies. I'm actually going to talk about potentially sort of a fairly boring part of my role, the less arty part. So when I presented in Manila, I talked about my practice, which has huge resonance with the, with both of the speakers actually. It's about love, care, relationality, creating spaces for transformational encounter through multimodal art. So that's sort of my heart and soul. And also I really like the last speakers and listening to them, talking about sort of positionality, creating spaces for students to enact their identities and to reach out to each other through difference, to create sort of political and transformative and growth kind of spaces. So that's my passion. What I'm going to talk to you about, though, is a bit about personal tutoring, frankly. I have to thank personal tutoring because that's why I've recently slid towards associate professor rather than senior lecturer. So there is merit in working with the corporate needs of an institution. However, as I said, my passion is in the arts. So hopefully some of this will come through as we talk. So Shortlist Me then is probably lurking in the backgrounds of BCU as well. It's a AI online platform, so it kind of speaks to perhaps some of the things that you've listened to in the last couple of days. That's rolled out by career centres in the UK. And I was tasked in my former role as sort of having an insight into personal tutoring across the university to sort of try and get creative arts students to do this tool, which was a challenge for me and a challenge for them. So I'm going to talk about those tensions, which have become a chapter now in this book.
Wonderful. So I'm very glad I was part of your presentation.
Okay.
Because I felt like a politician.
Yeah.
So
Go, Sasha. Thank you. Right. I might have interviewed Sasha then as part of this with the technology, but I can't. Okay, so I've got some notes which I'm just going to bring up on my phone because I can't see them on the screen just in case I need to. So in a sense, what I'm also going to speak to is this thing called HESA graduate outcomes. Now in the UK, these, if you don't know, maybe you all do know, maybe they exist as well outside the UK, but it's a way that we kind of quite, in my opinion, quite punitively measure. And this again relates a little bit back to the identity from the last presentation we talked about. We punitively measure, or the government punitively measures, where our creative arts performance students are in 15 months' time after graduating. And that brings us funding and affects our league tables and puts huge pressure on us, I think, as creative practitioners to help our students now narrate their successes. So it's kind of this tension that I was kind of looking at, and in a sense then looking at how through this particular rollout of this particular system, which is one of many, how maybe how students are they being allowed to perform and narrate their identity and practice employability for the future, or are they simply being sort of farmed and channeled down the usual kind of corporate norms and capitalist roles, etc. So that's where it keys into the political bit that you've all perhaps been talking about outside this working group session. So performance in terms of HESA is a very narrow performative measure that looks at things like postcodes, salaries, identity, etc. But of course, a lot of our students will go out and say, oh, I work in Wetherspoons, 15. But of course, what they're actually doing is they've got this really imaginative, creative portfolio career that they fail to sort of say, well, actually, I'm running my own business, I'm doing all that. So I'm quite passionate in leading fine art, but I am empowering students to be able to vocally sell themselves in that way, but to sell themselves for who they really are, and to actually, in a very bold way, try and sort of challenge the measures that say it's success, when actually our students aren't successful in the ways that they are being measured. So AI's performative nature I'm interested in. I really would like to work with it aside in my own work, and I love the sort of relational dialogue you can have with like a chat GTP and the playfulness of that. But I'm going to talk a little bit more, I guess, about the sort of sinister side of that. So these are the official research questions I asked for the paper. But what I was really interested in was how we can use AI in creative education to challenge the political norms that we live with. So as Carla and Andrew were saying, so we challenge reductive models, normative reinforcements, and what is our students' positionality in this? And again, I think I say, particularly in the UK, the art school used to be an art school. It was outside university measures. And now the art school is in the academy. And now, of course, the academy is a political entity in the larger corporate world. So in all of these measures, there's this sort of constrictions going on. So the stakes are particularly high, I think, for our arts and humanities students, performance students, and we've got to question, I think, as educators, and we're in a pedagogy working group, how we help our students take control of the narrative. Is it the student or is it the system? So my actual questions and thoughts as an artist rather than a deputy university senior tutor was about how we can help shape creative arts students to better narrate their personal and professional identities and attributes. How can we do this without reinforcing institutional norms? Can we find ways that AI can work to truly accommodate sort of the non-linear performative nature of creative practice? Or are we just sort of guilty in a sense, and so all of us have to conform, we have to get paid, etc., but to forcing students to conform to these reductive kind of corporate paradigms? So the importance of cultivating curiosity and learning in arts and humanities, cultivating critical thinking, yes, and questioning, but having that human in the loop still, and a need to, and again, this talks to the environment that we've just seen that was very exciting architecturally and performatively, but how we create simulation capacities or environments that spark both excitement and fear in education, because that's how we can be truly creative or disruptive. So this is a photo of a typical fine art student who's looking delusioned with the technology. So, you know, here she is, she's in her third year. She's being asked to sort of answer some questions. So Shortlist Me basically trains you to perform better at interviews. And she's thinking, you know, what is this? This is not me. Who is this? And there are various, as we will see, instructors on screen. So when I spoke to Becca, we talked about if it's reducing it to a set of sort of molded data points, or is there other ways of using technology? I don't know, because I'm not wonderful at technology or programming or AI, but I am interested in it. How can we challenge these molds, basically? I'm going to skip through that because that's rather dense, and I'm going to also just refer to my notes a bit to make sure I'm not missing anything interesting. Yeah, so again, in terms of the last presentation, I was thinking, so where in terms of this is the room for praxis, practice-informed teaching? You know, are we really questioning things like relational pedagogies, which I'm interested in, that come through writers such as Gravett through performance? Why are we restricting them to sort of perform, open them up, and then perform to computer in these ways? So as an overview, then, the study challenged the effectiveness of AI interviews for creative arts students, and I worked with 18 students from fine art, musical theatre and technical theatre. And they went through these kind of mock interviews with this system. What I also employed was this methodology called video cued recall, which is part of my more artistic background. Candy and Edmonds coined it. So it's where you do something and then you immediately watch a film of yourself having done it, and you speak back to the film about how you felt at a particular moment. So it's kind of used as a trigger. So I wanted to use that after they've talked to the machine, just to try and get more lived experience embodied reactions. So my external motivation, as I said, is to aiming to make career engagement more appealing and to improve graduate outcomes and performance metrics. But my internal motivation was to look about how these students are narrating personal experiences and AI-mediated performance. And I wanted to explore where their voices and agency lied or didn't lie in this performance landscape. So again, just a few images of the kind of mock interview AI person talking to them. That's me actually having a go. And the actual student on the left there. And asking really who's evaluating their performance identities, where's this data going, whose perspectives are they really leading? And how did the students just grapple themselves with evaluating their own identity in response to what the AI told them was kind of right, wrong, or problematic? So the type of questions then, so it went through 3 stages. So the student answered these 6 questions on the screen that were prompted by this AI. Then they went into the video cued recall, where they watched themselves back on the screen. And what was also unnerving for them is they were completing this task, they could see themselves all the time. So obviously in a normal interview, you're not looking at yourself whilst you're being interviewed, which was problematic. So the external objective was for them to assess the provocations around these 6 questions. And environmentally, I wanted to put them in a place of ease, so they did them in a familiar setting. And what's interesting is when the university rolled it out, nobody responded from the creative arts at all as a, can you do this online and tick these boxes? So it was still hard work recruiting them. So this is a typical creative arts student, possibly. And this is the interviewer, who they are supposed to be responding to and conforming to and wanting to impress. So you can already see just from those visuals how this is kind of not going to happen. So the student said, I felt I was trying to please the interviewer rather than give my true response. It was trial and error to try and get the right thing, which we can all do again in an interview. We try and please, but it's what they're trying to please rather than how they're trying to please it. Some of them found the unpredictability of the stimulation useful because it was like being on a panel interview. So also they had different interviewers that would pop up asking each question, which was quite unnerving for a lot of them, especially as we know lots of our students have additional needs as well. And it did work for some more than others, actually, in terms of that, which could be unpacked. So in terms of the key findings from that, the students were often felt they were playing to the system, prioritising AI-friendly answers over authentic responses. And there were dynamics raised, there were concerns raised about how these AI systems like Shortlist Me might force creative individuals into more conservative, risk-averse narratives. They felt, in terms of relationality, that while the tool was providing feedback on technical aspects, it sort of says you said 6 times, etc. There was no nuance there about tone, body language, and it lacked a relational sort of immediacy that's inherent in creative practice, And the absence of the human interaction in there resulted in an interview as performance, where students questioned the authenticity of their engagement with the AI. Yeah, and then there were also terms that we used in the questioning which reinforced a corporate-driven model of employability. So it's about leadership and networking that placed these students in situations that they found reductive and alienating. Moreover, the AI's inability to adapt the nuances of creative process-orientated thinking revealed its limitations to capturing the non-linear narratives essential to arts practice. So after these 18 students had this one-to-one performance with AI, seen themselves, responded, they then got together in focus groups where we sort of unpacked the activity. And that was really interesting because it's where that relationality and the presence of potentially I could embody the interviewer, for example, as such, but I'm coming from that creative perspective, brought this more sort of collective understanding and findings. So really I was looking at whether now they can facilitate this sort of what happened as a transmittable learning experience in the real world with me, essentially. So students what was nice that what began to happen is that students co-interpreted and reflected on each other's responses. There was some sort of shared accountability. There were shifts in perspectives throughout the discussions. I was then able to be there and observe, which enhanced data interpretation in terms of body language and humour, etc. But there was also a sort of coding and background of key themes that emerged. So in the end, this is the kind of screen that they saw in the first stage when they were talking. So it's very small on the screen, but it will tell them your interview readiness is 46 out of 100. You are too slow. You said so one time, right? And they were like, this, we've gone through this whole process, and is this it? Is this what we get back? But when we unpacked it, the sort of intrinsic ethnographic kind of feedback was more interesting. Okay. Let's just skip through here. So again, I mean, more on sort of thematic findings and what they found as emergent themes that were kind of lacking and problematic. There were some valued sort of qualities, some improvements needed. Mostly there were sort of issues with the interview visuals or the corporate norms in the background. They wanted more increased variety, more intuitive responses, even maybe an AI kind of response that, an avatar ability to build that was more aligned with who they would be and who they would want to be. And they were concerned about their data as well in terms of was the AI learning for them and to what impact would that have. So they decided in the end that they wanted better control over tools and an ability to have secure and collaborative recording and folders so they could sort of say to mum and dad, mum, this is what this is, what's your input, or an employer, or they could share, and they could also be more creative in that process. They wanted flexible avatars, different interview environments. So again, gamification that was mentioned earlier could be sort of a clue forward. There were limitations. Were they going to resist it or accommodate this process? They were kind of accommodating me to help me because they knew I needed to do it, but there was also resistance to the software, which again points to the importance of sort of relationships and learning and building together rather than being put through a particular system. Very time sensitive. Anything with AI, this findings might now be yesterday's news. Cultural bias, loads of female participants with creative experience. But there were some really interesting questions were raised about AI as a sort of political actor. And it is designed with standardised corporate job interviews in mind. It inherently serves the political interests of the capitalist economy, and creative students felt constrained by the system's limitations, noting that the platform seemed more interested in compliance than in fostering innovation. Concerns around negotiating identity. So in terms of it being a relational performative growth tool, that became the site of tension for students. Rather than expanding their ability to explore professional identities, they felt it constrained their potential. And one student observed it felt more like trial and error, suggesting that the platform's feedback loop could adopt safe, predictable answers rather than push creative boundaries, which is what we're all about as educators and practitioners. Relational technology or political tools. So the study found that relationality as a core element of creative practice was severely compromised by AI's mechanistic approach. Although students appreciated some aspects of the software's user-friendliness, they criticised its lack of responsiveness to the messy, iterative nature of creative work. And the result was that AI's role as a political tool that standardised outcomes rather than supporting the diverse trajectories of arts graduates. So in conclusion, you can see some of the sort of main conclusions on the screen there, but to reclaim the AI space for creative arts students, I concluded that we need to shift from the static, politically conservative technologies toward dynamic, relational, responsive systems. Anyone that can do that with me, welcome. And that there were 5 essential improvements that were identified by our students. That the creative adaptability needed to be better to offer a broader range of scenarios that reflected the diversity of creative careers, avatars, prompts, and feedback mechanisms that could be customizable, allowing students to engage with the interview process as a co-creative, co-effective, reflective space. They wanted to reclaim relationality, incorporating real-time interactions with tutors or even other students that could reintroduce the collaborative dialogical aspects missing from the AI-generated feedback, and that this would help restore the relational dimension critical to creative pedagogies. Beyond metrics. So rather than focus on measurable employability outcomes as per PISA standards, AI systems need to allow for nuanced qualitative responses that reflect the complexity of creative practice. Privacy and politics. Students raise serious concern about privacy, particularly regarding the storage and use of their interview footage in an age where where data is political currency. And any AI tool used for employability must prioritise data protection and give students control of how their interviews are stored, shared, and used. And finally, sort of challenging HESA's narrow metrics. So finally, the study calls for a fundamental rethinking of HESA's graduate outcome measures. The current system incentivises AI tools that standardise student experiences to fit into predefined employability frameworks. But for the creative arts students, success is more fluid and multifaceted than a job title within 6 months of graduation, or even 15. And AI systems we adopt must reflect that. So that's kind of me, really, and that's the book it will appear in at some point. Yeah.
And now I'm going to rightfully resume my throne here.
Yeah, I want to ask the question.
No, not yet. So thank you so much, Alice, for this wonderful presentation. Do we have any questions?
Yes, you were asking students how to change and make better, more inclusive, and many other things. The AI. Why are we not challenging them to think about how to change and create a better society than better AI?
Yeah, good question. It's true. Well, I think we are as practitioners. I mean, I would say that is absolutely what I do in my day to day. I mean, the Fine Art course is a socially engaged, outward-facing practice course. So it is about them thinking at every point within their creativity, which is nuanced, subjective, is about opening them up as human beings to make work that does change and affect and transform communities. I'm absolutely with you in that. But I guess we've also, and then this kind of tornness in me as well. I'm kind of intrigued by AI. It's permeating everywhere. It's here. So how can we, as creatives that do care about people and communities and societies, I guess give our students confidence to challenge and narrate and push back, or even know how to control, or I haven't really, I don't know if I have an answer, but I think your question is absolutely right.
Yeah, that would be a good methodology to think about and propose and to work with students on. Because these like KISA standards or whatever is just putting them into molds.
Yes. Yes.
As well as our work.
This is Professor Ivan Pravdic, is one of the co-directors of the conference.
Huh.
Because you
Nice to
didn't
meet
introduce yourself, because everybody in the world needs to know who you are.
I just know you as the nice man that gave me a bag. So
Bag man.
but that isn't that so tall, right? Okay, we just summed it up then. You're the nice man that gave me a bag, right? And that has affected me as a human being and society, but you're also a professor, you know, in the same way as I'm Alice that teaches fine art and will listen and try and help you find who you are in your way. But I'm also having to do the other thing as deputy, you know, so that was kind of interesting because that's what you are to me, but then we have our titles and our performances and our roles, I guess.
Okay, so can I ask some questions?
Yeah.
My questions, and then we also have some more questions. So I have the challenge of my sight and my handwriting. All right, so you mentioned something else that you were you're coming from arts practice.
Yeah.
And so you're obviously exploring here digital tools, and I presume that you were working with some kind of media digital arts practice as well.
Yeah.
And so how is that arts practice being, for you, digital art practice being translated into teaching? And is this kind of applicability of AI, is that a key thing, or you are actually extending to different models as well?
Really good question. So yeah, my own practice, it kind of relates to the nice man with the bag professor. And your question is, so my own work is about enabling deep relational encounters through digital practice, but also physical forms. So I won't go on and on, but for example, something I shared in Manila was a 12-month project with 12 participants who self-advocated into the project. So it was a very intergenerational mix of people. And they worked with me for a year, first through online digital dialogue, through Evernote software, actually, where I would send out provocations that were intended to bring people into touch, and then into points of trouble, traction, and then into identifying something they wanted to transform in their lives. So although it's only touching those 12 people, not like the whole world, it was a sort of intense experience over that time. And what was extracted from those digital multimodal dialogues was then something that each of those adults needed to transform in their lives. And as an artist practitioner, if I was comfortable with what had emerged from the data, because as practitioners, the data emerges, I think, rather than top down. We then went out on a performative encounter. So we might have walked around Stowe in the UK, which is a huge park, with a 75-year-old with his backpack who wanted to unpack all these Beatles records, and that's what we did for a day. Or I went sledging with someone on their 40th birthday because they'd never been sledging. I mean, it's on my YouTube channel, these different videos. But so we did this performative encounter, and then I filmed that, and that was gifted back to them. And then these films were restaged in large sculptural objects that had like Arduinos and things and sensors and things. So they would hold the audience, and the idea was about to create spaces of slowing down, reflective spaces, and how the artist's vision, the participants' world, and your own world as a participant slow down and kind of converged in that point to create those points of reflection, transformation, and change. So that's my practice. And how does that relate to this? I suppose I'm interested in
how it can be extended.
Yeah, how it can be extended. So maybe it's forms of digital storytelling, and I'm wanting some of the work I also do at Lincoln is work with adults in recovery from addiction with the students, and we go in and we learn a bit of art psychotherapy, have a bit of art psychotherapy and coaching in my background, and we learn stuff in the morning, and then they go and work with these adults with lived experience in the afternoon. My brain is now going like this, and why am I doing this? Right, but again, it's a very intensive process, like the process of my artwork. So it's looking at how And I'm looking at it now in terms of digital storytelling. And maybe AI, if I understand it and can train it enough, could be useful to not be the one, I'm the sole one sending 240 prompts back to over 21 days to 12 participants. I can't do that. And the students can't always go in and work in the charity one-to-one with that intensity and also safeguarded, etc., etc. So I'm interested, I think, in returning to my artistic performative roots, blended with, as with the first speaker, arts and health. I'm really interested in that, to how AI can perhaps be captured as a relational tool and as a free tool, and on various other platforms like the Evernote I talked about earlier, to actually do some of the work for me, but without losing the quality. So I'm interested how we can work with that
inspires me
agency.
here to try to teach AI to become Robin Hood.
Yeah.
A noble direction.
You as a professor of dramaturgy, so you can see he's already creating a next play.
Maybe we need to work together.
So just because I really want to hear something, just to explain something that, in a way, what's happening here is a sort of an in-between hybrid, because it's connected to a conference where we talked about lots of things, but it's also our working group where certain topics that come out are not going to go away. And so that question about how do we work AI into society, how do we bring arts practice, and the amazing example you gave of actually using AI in pedagogy, they're not going to necessarily go away, because this is going to trace sort of a pathways for us in the future. And certainly we're going to have some more meetings before Cologne, before Germany, but by that time we should sort of, conceptualize something relevant to this. So let's point, and then we can go. So in terms of your pedagogical applicability of AI to the interviews, what do you think were and the relationship between the persona that AI creates and the individuality of the student? At the end of that process, what do you think were long-term benefits for students?
Well, again, that's an interesting question. I didn't speak about it, but actually, some of the students found it incredibly alienating and screen-based and devoid of human contact. But actually, some of the students who, as we all must have, who are very timid about face-to-face contact now because of COVID and screens. And I was at an interesting conference the other day where it said that 47% of young people wish TikTok hadn't been invented, because they're so addicted to it. So, and they're looking for this human contact again. So I think the benefits of working with them was that the desire for human contact became very clear, and that nuance and actually being held by us as academics intellectually, but also we're having to also do obviously quite a lot of identity coaching and confidence building and everything, but that's what we do in creative arts. But some students who would actually be really timid to even make eye contact with me, even though I think I'm a nice person, etc., or to turn up, etc., actually did go into this little world and actually talked about how it could weirdly become an OCD addictive way of repeating it or trying to improve. So they could get locked into the system, which is problematic. But they also felt safe because they could fail with somebody who wasn't real rather than real life. So there are some sort of positives in a weird way that could be extracted or developed. It wasn't all bad, but I guess they just need the agency to help form.
I also think you're very nice.
Thank you, Sasha. That's why I came. I like Paula as well.
We're being recorded and we're live.
That's a good question. Hello.
Hello.
My quick question, well, it's not really a question, it's a comment really.
Excuse me, can we have your name?
Hello, I am Stephen Sims. I am the
You are next.
I'm Stephen Sims. I'm up next. I'm Vice Principal at Royal Birmingham Conservatoire, Head of Acting. Now then, in my work environment, we are given lots of online training that we have to do in things like health and safety and data protection and whatever. And it has a very similar system, it seems, to what you're talking about with this, in the sense that you get shown some videos and then you get little questionnaires on, you know, what does this mean? What does that mean? And you kind of make your selections and you go through and you get 7 out of 10 right. And so you go back, or at least I do, because I want to get 100%, because I think also as vice principal, I should get 100%. But I'm not learning anything because I'm not even looking at what the answer is. I'm looking at, oh, it's answer number 3. And so when I go back, I just make sure I click the right one and I get it. So I can see that this should kind of help somebody to develop their identity and get better at doing interviews. But I can also see that what you end up doing is trying to just please, as they've said, the AI algorithm, and you're not, and it becomes something not about you at all, but about ticking the box for the outside. So that's strange.
And I know I'm guilty of screenshotting the 7 out of 10.
Yes.
So I remember what I've got to get right
when you go back the next time.
And then it says you now have 30 purple fish web things overdue, and and it's that complete and then you try and cheat the system by not watching the whole video on the red or the blue fire extinguisher, but thinking I actually think I could answer those questions at the bottom to get onto the next one. So I think it's exactly that.
So just interesting that.
But it's like students not reading their feedback, isn't it? Looking at
just the number.
Mark. Yeah.
It's this whole idea of corporate sort of, which I find very strange, especially in the arts and in education, where we're emulating some kind of idea of business corporality, you know, a building society or a bank and their means of operation, business, trying to say that's the way that we, to have legitimacy, should operate. And you know, that the enormous world crashes are all down to those kind of things that we're trying to emulate not working. You know, the world falls apart because they don't actually work. Thank you.
Well, it's your turn now, I think.
Your
turn at the hot seat in the room.
Do we have any other question? Chase.
Oh, hi.
You are.
My question is more.
Yes, you are. You can introduce yourself, please.
Oh, hi. My name's Jenya. I'm a PhD student from Royal Birmingham Conservatoire, and Sasha is my supervisor. I'm sorry. My question is more about your initial statement. Like, if we are artists based on some traditional art, like a physical sense or some painting sense, is more traditional. How? Like before I know a lot of AI things, IT things coming soon, but also we know we need to learn something. But in the initial stage, we didn't have any knowledge about the real AI technique or some formula or something. How could we, like, going through this first step to lay this knowledge in our mind, to change our thinking style, trying to get this thing, okay, right now I could be thinking how to let them link with AI or digital things. Because for me personally, I know that that's a benefit for me, but I don't have the initial state, there's a background knowledge. I'm hard to do that. The first step, I think, is very important for a lot of the, like, physical or traditional arts, the student or artist.
Did you?
I think did I hear? I think maybe I heard.
Chase is the dancer.
Okay.
In classical Chinese dance.
Yeah.
And so she would like to know how can she use some of these methods that you talk about AI and connect that with her own thinking about dance, because there is a lack of background information on how do you work with AI.
So a lack of background information on how you work with AI in dance, or just in
generally how do you, because it can be applicable to anything.
Yeah.
And it's a good question.
Yeah.
How do you work as an artist, as a creator, as a practice PhD, and what to bring in your thinking about AI? Because it's Lev Manovich, who was there 2 days ago, was talking about it's a kind of a different entity.
Yeah.
To what we are.
Yeah.
So how do we bring that in, particularly because there is a lack of background?
Yeah.
And the lack of background is that we don't teach AI or digital AI where we are from.
Mm.
So
I can speak from a fine art perspective a little bit in terms of the reproduction of paintings and things like that, and the sort of fear around AI producing artwork. So there's quite a lot of debate about that. I also heard you talk about teaching and technique, and I think there is an argument that maybe AI could be used in forms of teaching and technique, possibly, because we're also in a stage, certainly where I'm teaching now, that teaching and technique in terms of painting, drawing, or whatever is accepted as something students come with, and that because we're in the stage of post-conceptual art and that and it is a socially engaged course, it's quite frightening for students actually sometimes to go, right, your first task is to go and sit in a cafe, listen to conversations and produce a piece of work based on that, but that public art. So they'll be like, this is not art. You know, what is this? So maybe there's an argument whereby there could be co-current teaching and stuff, or courses going on where AI is also delivering technique whilst human beings are also expanding the actual person's capacity and thinking. In terms of dance, I know not a lot, but I do have colleagues that work with, you know, with green screen and bodysuits and augmented stuff. And that the AI then puts their bodies into different spaces and things, and then the avatar, and then you can dance with avatars and things like that. And that's quite exciting. And there is a chap who colleagues will know, Liam Jarvis, who's written a lot about theatre and stages, and has done an interesting project recently where he'll sort of just ask AI to recreate, I don't know, Rome's, you know, or the Acropolis or something like that. So there's something curious, I think, as artists, if we look at it, if we look at AI as a player or another tool, or particularly with me, because I'm interested in people, and I know it isn't a people, it isn't a person, but I am interested in the relational. That's core of what I'm interested in. So, but as a dancer, you're working relationally to your body, aren't you, in space, or, you know, the human being. So you could dance with the virtual. I mean, I think it's quite exciting, but also it's who it's controlled by and who it's serving, I guess, is always the question, because of our need to have our own agency. But I think nothing is ever completely original anymore. And again, that's okay, you know, but maybe there's ways of learning. I think we should be scared of learning from each other, or from these things that we've created. Or I'll finish in a minute, but our art school, when I was at art school in the late 90s, you know, it was like, this is my work, you know, and don't look and don't steal. And I think as performers, already you're much better at working together collaboratively. And in my job, why I'm here really, I'm not a fine art painter as such, although that's my training was traditional. But I think about painting with people or spaces or places or objects and things as a sort of expanded field of drawing. And a dancer, I guess, would work, you know, your tool is your body, isn't it? You're working environmentally. So it's another part of our environment, I think, that we could learn from as well as teach. Don't know if that answered your question.
it's a good answer.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, really short because we need to move on, please.
Just a quick question, because it's about interviews and avatar.
Yes.
Did you any comment, because with the avatar, we can't have licking gestures that we do have in kind
Yeah.
was there any comments on that, or how?
Yeah, they really didn't like it because they couldn't have, they didn't feel like there was the eye contact that we've got now. There was no, and the actual weird thing with that system, the eye contact was with themselves when they were doing it. And they actually said, it was quite interesting watching the video of themselves back afterwards. They found that quite useful because they could then work out their own nuances and things that the AI hadn't picked up. But they really didn't want to be watching themselves while conducting the interview because of the self-consciousness and then a sort of a weird thing, like if you know someone's going to take your photo, you might kind of pose for the photo. So it was all very contrived. But yeah, they didn't like the fact that there wasn't a proper engagement with immediately responsive human being or machine. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. A big applause from our Roman call. Fascinating. And so obviously I'm just gonna be taking a photo opportunity moment here.
To you.
So I will not introduce Stephen. What do I take? Stephen will introduce himself. And why am I here? I have no idea. Okay, Stephen, please introduce yourself and let's go.
Hi. This Mailer Network, I'd like to thank my friend here enormously because thanks to the strangeness of my university's laptops, none of my presentation could be uploaded either to Zoom or to any other known thing known to mankind. So
all BSU laptops are unfunctional because admin put the lock on that.
So we'll see. So hi, I'll introduce myself. My name is Stephen Sims. I am the Vice Principal of Royal Birmingham Conservatoire, which is a place which trains classical musicians and jazz musicians, but also the part I'm responsible for trains actors, performers, stage managers, backstage people, that theatre side. So what we used to call the drama school. I am a professor of actor education, and for the first 20 years of my professional life, I was just an actor. That's how I earned my money. So I came late into this kind of academic world, and I'm just completing a PhD, which is what this research that I'm going to show you is about. And I think that's enough. Okay, I don't know what time I'm finishing, Paula, so...
I'm chairing this.
Oh, sorry, I don't know what time, Professor Djendjerovic, I don't know what time I'm finishing, so...
You have 20 minutes.
I've got about 40 hours of stuff to show you, so mainly some videos. So what the proposition I'm talking to you about is I'm involved in exploring the creative process about making devised interdisciplinary work with students, but students who are trained as actors, so trained as interpreters of other people's work. So let's see if this works. Yes. So I'll start with a little quote, which there it says, devising is a magic trick. A rabbit pulled out of an empty hat. A penny pulled from a rabbit's ear. A fairground built on a penny. So this idea that it's some kind of magic, where does the creative thing come from? And when I wrote down for myself that, when I look back on the work that I've done, I sometimes just can't explain it to myself. I don't know where it come from. Where did these ideas arrive from? Why did I choose certain things? So, for example, how do I go from the color blue, which we did in one of the plays that we created? How do you go from that, from two dogs talking to each other about their favorite sweets while sitting on top of a space rocket waiting to be fired into space? It feels like magic to me. So it's kind of I'm exploring work and wondering if I explore it and try and explain it, will it still work, really? So what am I involved in? Well, it's about making new theatre. It's about helping students be empowered professionals, because nobody wants another actor. It's the first thing I would say to anybody, There are statistics, 2019, there I wrote down, Queen Mary's University said that 90% of actors are out of work in the UK at any one time. And then it's hard to get these facts because nobody wants to say it, but over in the States in 2004, after interviewing like nearly 2.5 million performers, only 2% of them seem to be able to say they can make a living out of acting. And that's making a living. That's not being rich like Timothée Chalamet or whatever. Now, I'm very interested in everything that everybody's talked about this morning. I was quite excited because Persephone talked about young people making stories out of their own experience in order to, she said, quote, learn without knowing it, quote. And a lot of my work has discovered that the students are in this process learning how to do it and learning about developing their identities without really knowing it. Again, a sort of magic trick. In the simulated studio that Carla and Andrew talked about, that was all about finding ways to explore identity and belonging, but also very interestingly had stuff about validizing the work of students and their own contributions, making students feel like that what they did was worthwhile. And thirdly, they talked about Archi-splice activity, which I found very exciting, which ties in very much to a lot of the devising work I've done using William Burroughs, the writer, had this technique called the cut-up, where he would cut up text, rearrange it, and find something new. This crashing together of seemingly disparate elements is very much part of the devising process that I use, called the RSVP methodology. But also, what we found in one of our projects called The Terror, which was about revolution eating its own children, there is a physicist, a popular physicist who's called Carlo Pavelli. He wrote a book called 6 Brief Lessons on Physics. And he talks about in quantum physics and gravity at the quantum level. I just want to give you a quick physics lesson now, because I'm not a physicist. Apparently, at the quantum level, time is very different to how you and I are experiencing it now. We experience time in a linear time, one thing after another. Ravelli says that at this level of reality, of experience, of size, we experience time like the English when they are queuing for a shop to open. Apparently, the English will make a line to queue, an orderly line, one after the other, when they're waiting for something. And that's how we experience time at this level. But he's Italian, and he says at the quantum level, time doesn't operate like that. It isn't an orderly queue. It's more like what Italians are like when waiting for something to happen. Everybody just rushes to that one place. Nobody's doing. And so, yeah. So at a quantum level, everything is happening at once. It's the kind of thing in quantum physics that drives your mind insane. But we use that as a sort of methodology of devising, which links to this Archi-splice idea, these cut-up ideas, this crashing together of idea. So my questions are all around what some of these, what people this morning have been talking about. Alice was talking about creating professional identities and identity coaching. And I'm interested, yes, in the creative experience of making new work, but also about how my students' professional identity is shaped by making new work. So because I'm practice rather than studying something, my idea is that, well, in making something, can we learn through that? Also, it questions my professional identity, how I relate to them, how we forge these things together as human beings, and what that methodology of learning is. So it's about new data works, and it's also about creating actors who can do that. So what I did was, the idea was, right, I'll make some stuff. And over the years of this study, we have made at least 6 full-scale professional level works, 2 of which feature myself as what I will call a solo artist, although I'm working with other people, but I am inside the project as a actor maker, experiencing it. 4 in which I am working with students as a kind of co-creator, as the director, facilitating that. And there's something about the way those 2 experiences inform each other. Trigger warning. I'm going to show you lots of videos now. Flashing lights, lots of nudity, unfortunately, mainly me. Physical violence, gunshots, if any of those things might worry you.
Close your eyes.
Go. Yeah, it's bad. So let's start here. The Macbeth Progetto is a project featuring me. It was directed by my coach, mentor, Professor Alexander Danjerovic, who is sat with us today as a director. We termed ourselves director on the inside, director on the outside. You can see me there doing a live version of it in Shanghai. You can see me doing a Zoom theatre version of it. This is just to give you a bit of an idea of what that content looks like.
Dig, man, there goes Mac the knife. the shark has pretty teeth, dear, and he shows them a pearly white. Just a jackknife has Mac heat, dear, and he keeps it out of sight. When the shark bites with
That'll do.
Do you mind just giving a context?
Yeah.
Where this was, because it was actually a part of the performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was part of the performance, which was a Zoom online version of Macbeth, which we did in collaboration with a Brazilian theatre company, Os Satiros, which very uniquely, and in terms of placeness and other ideas in this conference that we've been part of, that theatre company is based in Sao Paulo in an area that was like a kind of red light district, quite a dangerous district, and also very particularly a lot of trans people and what you might call drag queens as well were working there in this twilight area of prostitution, and this theatre company set up in the middle of it transformed the area. So the people I'm working with there are trans women or drag queens. They're different terms in Brazil for how they're preferred to be described. They're playing witches, luring in the little clip there Macbeth to commit deeds. And one of the themes was the impossibility of getting rid of the blood, which is why you see Macbeth going mad, trying to shower himself off. So that's one area. This, looking for Andy, another solo piece that I created, which is really about context here. If you imagine a presenter at a conference is giving a conference and you discover that they actually believe themselves to be Andy Warhol, they not only believe themselves to be Andy Warhol, but they believe that they are a vampire and Andy is a vampire. And that you discover that all the doors in here are locked and I am going to sort of eat you all. I eventually invite you to Studio 54, where I get killed, but then I enter into a transitional world where, rather like a pharaoh becoming a god, I find immortality. So it's kind of about identity, I suppose. And here's a quick clip of that.
And all the doors are locked.
Move on from that. You saw lots of the kind of interdisciplinary items there, an amazing inflatable set the size of this room that was used as a screen for projecting onto. It then inflated and the audience could be invited in. It became a kind of disco, projections on the outside, lots of audience participation. You saw that I made lots of documentary movies, which were, I went on kind of pilgrimage to all the important places in Andy Warhol's life. They were all integrated into this live performance, again, with the Brazilian theatre company that was in Sao Paulo. And this is the first of 4 student pieces. This is the first one called The Terror. This is the one which crashed in that way of quantum physics at a smaller level. Time crashed together. So it started to be about the French Revolution. It ended up talking about the Huguenots. It ended up talking about the invasion of Cuba. If it had been done now, I'm sure the wars that are taking place now and the horrors. And it's really about how we, in order to do something good, we end up doing terrible things, and then the terrible things take over. Again, just to describe some of the multi-layered aspects of it, this took place over 2 years. I used one group, and then the second year, another group of students to kind of, in a longitudinal really way of doing it. You can see that by the use of projections, you can get what look like very sophisticated looking sets, very high quality looking production values through the use of projections there on the left. On the right, this is the same show a year later with slightly different people. You can see that we've got huge projections at the back of live on stage action. And that's a student telling the story of a terrifying dream that he had. And we were kind of reenacting it in live on stage and projecting it. Another student here at the front is doing a movement piece, which is kind of expressive of that experience. So it's very multi-layered storytelling, quite sophisticated. Now, this is very different for actors who are trained to take a Shakespeare play and just think about their character and interpret it for someone else. Everything has to come from them. They're devising it, and it's a completely different way of thinking for them. It's also, in terms of their experience, they find it exhausting, completely exhausting, because rather than just thinking about themselves, they're thinking, well, what would this be like if I had a certain projection? What would it be like if we had a video? What would it be like if the lights did this? They're thinking in a total theatre way about multiple aspects of performance rather than just themselves. And while they find that incredibly fulfilling, and it gives them enormous ownership, they do find it very tiring. Here's a little clip of what that looks like.
We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal.
I won't bother you. There's another one about Nosferatu. This turned to be about the relationship of power in a rehearsal room, really. And it explored they started to explore kind of sadomasochistic experiences between people, but it was really about the power play. Because I used a kind of a discourse analysis to explore what was happening in terms of the relationships in the rehearsal room, so that the students were aware of how they needed to change that kind of power balance in order to. Here's another online one. This was about the Bride of Frankenstein as a starting point.
Yeah, sorry, yes. Which of them came to Belgrade? Because one of them came to Wu.
It was Nosferatu. It was Nosferatu.
Nosferatu came to Belgrade and was presented in Wu.
I think. But Bride of Frankenstein, you can see it's using the Zoom. This was in lockdown. And again, this was what Andrew called, the archi-splice method, the cut-up method of producing and using the theme of Bride of Frankenstein, which is about creating something out of bits of other bits. It was sort of exploring the methodology of making in the making. And what I discovered is that all the learning was done via this learning without doing it, this experiential learning, where they were making stories about what it was they were doing. And these stories could be quite vague. So International Klein Blue started with the color blue. I'll talk about that. This slide, Professor Danjerovic has shown before. The methodology is the RSVP cycles created by Lawrence Halprin, or his wife really as well. You start with resources, you put them together into a sort of structure called a score. You think about what works, what doesn't work. You perform it really. What are resources? But basically anything you've got to hand, and you walk into a room and it's like, well, what languages do you speak? This carpet's on the floor. What film did you see on TV last night? How are you feeling? These are the resources that you explore, and you explore each little resource and you play with it to see what happens. Then you don't think about the end product. You only think about the end product once you've created a whole load of resources. And then, as Alice said earlier, you see what emerges. You're not really imposing a linear structure from the outside. You're asking the question, what's emerging here? And I wanted to just show you an example of how a kind of initial resource gets transformed into something completely new. This is a little clip from The Manifold to Earth by Nicholas Roeg. And it's a very simple little scene where someone is selling a wedding ring in a pawn shop, in a shop. What we don't know, the person is actually an alien from another planet. So this one ended up being all about identity. And there's a couple of things I'd like you to notice in this. He shows a passport, and in order to look more like the passport, he nervously kind of brushes his hair to one side. That seemed quite important. There's a close-up of a gun at the end. There is music. There is lots of things in the shop that seem to be sort of objects that don't move, but they're actually really informing the hair. Here's the scene anyway.
Can I help?
Yes, I want to sell this.
Where'd you get this ring?
It's mine. My wife gave it to me. Look, the initials are on the inside. Yes?
TJN. Do you have your ID?
I'm British. I have a passport.
Thomas Jerome Newton. This is not a pawn shop.
Beg your pardon?
If I buy this ring now, you can't redeem it later. Understand?
I understand.
Okay. Now the students looked at this and they started to take it apart. They were listening to the soundtrack. There's a little bit before this, because I could only get this bit with copyright online, where you see David Bowie's character lying down waiting, kind of upside down. The owner arrives at the shop, opens the shop, turns the shop sign from closed to open. Alarm bells go off, like in the distance, dogs bark. Students took all that on board and transformed it into a rather extraordinary kind of physical piece. It starts off here. This is the play was called International Klein Blue. They're on a speedboat, which I think they've rather marvelously made here out of a kind of parasol spinning. Anyway, this is how that scene ended up being transformed into something completely new by magic.
I need to sell this! I know a place!
help?
Yes. I need to sell this.
Do you have any ID?
Yes. I'm French. I have a passport.
Eve Klein. This is not a pawn shop.
Pardon me.
If I buy this now, you can't redeem it later, understand?
I understand.
£20.
20 francs.
Take it or leave it.
So they're trying to play around with kind of time.
Well, we have about a minute to it.
Okay, so they're trying to play around with how do you transform the language of film into the language of stage, really? How do you give emphasis to things that you can do by just a close-up? I haven't got time to explain that this is basically the two power dynamics that are at play. In traditional theatre, you have a pyramid of power where the director and the author of the piece really are laying down the law, and the actors are really low down as interpreters of that. When you're devising work, the actors are right at the center of it, and the power is constantly transferring between them and all sorts of other people. It's not exactly flat, but people take different leads at different times, and I think that manufactures it. So you're sort of working with chaos, but making sense of it. And it's all a bit like a magic trick, as I said, because you're giving form to formless things in this devising process. And the learning is imposed and hiding within the making of the work. And so it really is, you're really pulling a rabbit from a hat and you're pulling a penny from a rabbit's ear. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this was okay. I'm not gonna ask any questions because it's not okay.
You're my supervisor.
Close to the work, but we're really interested if you have any other. Obviously, you can see there's like a lot of material here, and Stephen can go easily another 2-3 hours on this. But I think it's fascinating work. Any questions, please?
Where can we read about this pyramid of power?
When my PhD comes out, you can read about it. That's kind of what I kind of.
We are planning to about February still be defending, and then there are already interest in publishing his work. So I'm hoping that by maybe end of the year, 25, as part of this IFTR. We'll produce a book, original book.
But essentially it's my own. It's a kind of Foucauldian sort of discourse analysis of the rehearsal room in the traditional model and in a devising model. Paolo.
Just to help you, similar diagrams you have at Richard Scheckler. Yeah, in his essays. It might be, but just there will be another thing, and I want to thank you about this term about exploring your resources. I make lecture on public relations and media communication, and we actually do it with students. We talk about films. I like to talk in this Halloween Eve about films about Halloween, and then go to values, etc. And I want to thank you for this structure and this idea.
Paula.
Yes, I am interested in the in the UK. I don't know how it is here. There's a kind of separation between drama departments
who give you a BA in drama, but not a qualification in acting. And they tend to, there's a long tradition of using devising methods, and that is nothing new. And yet you're introducing this world to a conservatoire that, where the aim is to be trained as a professional actor. So what are the demands of working with these methods in the environment of the conservatoire, where there's such a strong emphasis on skills and being kind of trained, if that makes sense?
Yeah, thank you. It's because of this triangle behind us where the student is placed in a subservient role to primarily the text in the UK, where we have, say, for example, Shakespeare, but also lots of writers who are really very important. Pinter, I mean, where they have a lot of social weight, or you could say, or kind of authority. And there's an awful lot, even voice training teaches you that you are the vessel through which you are going to allow a genius to speak. And you're trying to get in touch with what they are trying to do and give an audience sort of it's not really your version, but what you interpret as them. You're trying to get close to that idea. And you're often, other people, directors, are telling you what to do. The designer's telling you what to do. You've already got your costume before you turn up. The set is telling you what to do. This is the period we're doing it in. You really low down on those decisions. And this way of working is absolutely ingrained in the profession, in the training. So as soon as you try to say, no, you have to be at the center of things, you are as important as Shakespeare, if not more important. You're thinking about how this does, and you are responsible. Nobody will rescue you. You have to do it. That takes a real shift in their thinking. Now, that shift is not just about making you work. It's about how they think of themselves as a creative person with agency over their lives, because that transfers into their professional world, where actors are waiting for other people to give them permission to work. They're sitting by telephones, or other gatekeepers, agents, casting directors are allowing them to work. They are waiting. And that's a real political shift in order to them they're taking agency over the creative process, but it also informs their agency over their professional life. And they start to think, I could make my own work, I could bypass all this. And other students are starting to do that. So it builds on the incredible skills that they've learned, which is again different to a drama department. So they've got incredible skills in which to use these devising techniques.
And you see, Paula, I mean, you do make a reference to UK, but I work in Serbia as well, and in this whole region, and the actors are not necessarily creators. If you go to established theaters over there, what actors do, they execute what director wants. The director is the one who interprets what playwright wants, or what dramaturgs tell them to do. Yeah. So that's here. But you see, if you think about any of the major avant-garde 20th century pillars, total theater was not invented yesterday. Edward Gordon Craig put the idea of total theater. Appia put the idea of where the performer, where the actor is. But I'm just going to say this, and I'll shut up because it's so difficult when you explain material. I remember there was a point when Stephen came from Paris. It was about a year you're into PhD, and you saw, I think it was a Caligula in the is it a Comédie Française in one of the French?
No, it was a version of Tony Visconti's The Damned, Les Damnés, at the Comédie Française.
Comédie Française, and he showed me then the clip of it, and he was mega excited because what you saw there part of the work that we explore later on. You saw the actor in the center, surrounded by the whole technology, the whole manipulation of the spectacle, the whole everything, the space, the text, the sounds. Like the actor was in the center, manipulating, working with that. And that kind of a new theater that you can actually see and putting across is the theater that requires a different kind of actors. It's not anymore, I have a beautiful voice, and I can talk, and I can do the text, because now you're dealing with the whole apparatus, the image, and you are part of the image, and you're the image maker. Yeah.
Hey, also taking account, because devising is political.
Yes.
And because it kind of looks differently into ownership and power. But then at the same time, how we can work or promote that way of working in a context where theaters are profit driven. So, and also how we talk, for example, when we talk about Thomas Ostermeyer, we talk about the director, but actually Thomas Ostermeyer collaborates with his drama theater team. So when we analyze that, we also kind of impose this single authorship, even that they are very collective, like Minushkin or
Yes. Yes, I as an actor, I worked with a theatre company called Cheap by Jowl, run by a director called Declan Donnellan, and he was very much in the mood in the way of Minushkin and other what one might call ensemble theatre companies. And we used to say that what that really means in an ensemble theatre company is that the director is the star, not any one individual actor, which again is a little bit different. The power structures are different. Like if you're a huge star and you go into Broadway or the West End or a movie, then you obviously have kind of a massive power, usually as a star based on your economic drawing power, isn't it, as you say? So it's a different power, but it's still a kind of about an individual, not about the collective. And there's a wonderful point that happens I've discovered in rehearsals, about halfway through, when usually if somebody from the outside comes in at the wrong time to see it, and it's not ready to be seen, but it's like there's an outsider. And the company will suddenly feel very self-conscious and will think, this is terrible, this is awful, this is just awful. And rather than, they've got two choices. They can either rebel, give up, walk out, or they have to go, right, we've got to make this work. We've got to make it happen. And it can be a real catalyst in them, in their journey towards taking control of what they do, this kind of crisis. And they really stop relying on an outside force like a director. Finances are always difficult in the theatre, so you're absolutely right. But again, rather than waiting for someone to give you a job, you can find ways. You don't need money to start with, and you can develop a project over periods. You could get enough money to do a bit of a project, and then maybe that will give you a chance to do more. So we have students who will take things to maybe a festival, and they've just done it for nothing, and then maybe that festival will give them a chance to apply for funding to do a bit more, and the project can grow. And people like who you've written about, Robert Lepage, a lot of his work in Canada is about starting something small scale with the knowledge it can grow into a huge international show if you can work with it. So
thank you, Stephen. Listen, we have now the business meeting after this. So we will give a huge applause to Stephen from Birmingham.